This is Empire Sports Alliance, unfiltered. No fluff, no filters, just the real side of sports. We're talking athletes, coaches, agents, doctors, executives, the people behind the scenes who actually move the needle. From building careers to surviving the grind to winning off the field. This is where real conversations collide.
You know, back in the day, you needed to know who won the 1997 World Series, who was the World Series MVP. Sure, you had books in the back of the room and media guides and record books. You could look this stuff up, but it wasn't as easy as just going to Google AI and just typing it in, which you could do now. So you had to have that ingrained knowledge. And, you know, there was a time where I would be a direct conduit to Mike Tirico's ear. He'd be broadcasting the Open Championship, and I'd be literally telling him in his ear. I had the button right to his ear to tell him that this is, you know, Tiger's third birdie in the last 4 holes. He would say it. Tom Rinaldi would be on the 18th green interviewing players as they were coming off of their round for the day, and I'd give him a nugget just to get into it. You know, let Tom do the interview, but he's got to have some nuggets to go with it. And he's standing on 18. He's not watching them. So, hey, you're interviewing Phil Mickelson. Just know that this is Mickelson's, you know, second best Open round, blah, 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 blah. I'd give it to him in his ear, and he would go and use it for his interview. That was how it used to work. Nowadays, you have your smartphones, you can Google everything, he can find that out. But it's all about giving everybody compelling statistical content. And the biggest roadblock that I had back then was sports betting content was illegal in 49 of 50 states.
Yeah.
ESPN is a national platform. Yeah. It's not wrong for them to go out there and give sports betting content, but how is that helping anybody if they can't use it anyway? So then once it goes legal in 2018, all of a sudden you're opening the door to, all right, I can give you all these nuggets and it can help you in many different ways.
Okay, yeah, which is completely different to, like, again, you know, what do you see today and all that? What do you see in terms of, from a betting perspective, the focus that a platform like ESPN has now? I mean, that's a big percentage, right? I mean, they always, you know, bring that stuff up. There's obviously a lot of, like, marketing revenue coming in. If you look, you know, certain, you know, of the leagues, in terms of what do you see on that end?
Well, right now they have a deal with DraftKings, so they're using DraftKings as their official odds provider. A lot of their stuff is sponsored by DraftKings. A lot of their activations are. So they're in there with DraftKings looking at sponsorship deals and looking at marketing opportunities. Again, they're using it as an entry to inform the fan of what they need to know. Because that's all ESPN, that's their whole basis, is to give compelling storyline information to fans to make them smarter. And using betting content, using analytical content. I mentioned earlier, Baseball Savant has stuff I don't even understand on there. There's so much analytical content. Giving fans, think about what it was like 15 years ago when you were doing fantasy football.
Yeah.
You would want to go to ESPN.com fantasy. You would want to download the app. You would want to watch fantasy now on Saturday and Sunday mornings. You wanted to get as much information as you can to help you make your decision in your lineup. It might be your second receiver. It might be your kicker, but you would go and consume all this information. Well, it's the same thing with sports betting. Like, I'm going to bet these games. Where can I get the most information to help me? Is it ESPN.com? Is it the betting app? Is it DraftKings? Is it listening to my podcast? Anything that can help you get as much information as possible to make your best decision and enjoy the game.
Do you feel like, you know, ESPN kind of like, at one point, in my opinion, kind of like the flagship of, like, you know, that type of content? They have lost some. Do you think there's others that stepped up? What's been your experience?
In terms of what content?
Sports betting as well as fantasy. You mentioned fantasy sports, you know, again, you know, and we have talked offline. Obviously, I have my Elite Legacy League, you know, platform from a fantasy perspective, but you know, what I see in terms of the data that's being provided, especially with, like, dynasty, keeper leagues, et cetera, more sophisticated leagues, there's a lot of other providers of data these days where once upon a time, if you wanted to have a sports update, you would go to ESPN.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a flood of other people. I still think they're the industry leader. I mean, they're still getting 11 million people to sign up every single year to do fantasy on the ESPN platforms. You don't see that anywhere else. There's just more competition. You know, you got CBS, you got Yahoo, you have Sleeper, you have your leagues, you have a whole bunch of different Elite and everything else. There's just, the market is expanding, but it's still the worldwide leader for a reason. They still have, you know, 11, 12 million people using their platform, numbers you don't get anywhere else. So they're still the leader. Do they have the best fantasy news, the best fantasy information? That depends on who you ask. Do they have the best fantasy platform? It depends on who you ask. It also depends on what you want. It's not the most customizable like other leagues are, but they have a much better interface than other people are.
Okay. And just again, so you spent, what was the total going back to your journey in terms of like years that you spent at ESPN?
I was there for 18 years, from
18
2005
years.
to 2023.
And then the next stop was Pro Football Network, correct?
Correct. I spent 2.5 years at Pro Football Network from 2023 to the summer of 25, just over a year ago.
Can you tell a little bit in terms of what they're all about, how the changes from like ESPN, kind of like the way you experienced it?
Yeah, it was smaller. It was more of a startup. They'd only been around 4 or 5 years. They had just been sold to a media conglomerate out in India called Absolute Sports. They were looking to scale up and take their website and their company to the next level. And that's what they came and hired me for. They said the biggest difference is it's a smaller company with a lot less red tape. And I mean that in a good way. Like, when you work for ESPN, you got the Disney company. You got a lot of competing priorities. What I want doesn't necessarily, get a higher priority than what somebody in another department wants when you're talking about 7,000 ESPN employees and 100,000 Disney employees. But you look at Pro Football Network, we have 20 to 25 employees, and I'm the chief content officer, and I want to do something that I only got the CEO to worry about. So a lot less levers to pull, but at the same time, a lot less resources because you don't have Disney behind you. You don't have an open bucket of resources and money. But it was fun for me to go from a big corporation like Disney to a smaller company like Pro Football Network and kind of just do my own thing, like lead their content and grow it and have a couple of NFL beats that we covered, have a podcast network that we had for a little while, launch a betting vertical that we had for a little bit over there, launch my own betting brand that I did at Pro Football Network before taking it elsewhere. The ability to do those type of things plus cover 2 Super Bowls. And again, up until this year in 2026, 27, ESPN ABC hadn't covered a Super Bowl since 2005 in terms of having the rights to it. So their ability to be there was different than it would be if you're covering, college football national championship. So I didn't do any Super Bowls at ESPN, but I got the Pro Football Network and I got to cover 2 of them.
Yeah. So what do you feel it was easy, not easy, maybe not the right word, but in terms of working with a big conglomerate like ESPN or doing more the boutique and kind of build up? So basically coming into a machine that's of existence versus like building something on your own.
There's pros and cons of both sides. You obviously can do a lot more when you're with a smaller company with less levers to have to go through to get it done. But you also have significantly less resource money-wise than you would have with Disney. Every dollar counts when you're with a startup. Everything you want to do does come with a money justification. If I were to pitch something at Disney and it get accepted, if it goes through the pipeline and gets accepted, they're not going to necessarily hold me to dollar for dollar value like you would if you're at a startup. That being said, there's a lot to be said for you being able to build something. Like, yes, I helped initiate the sports betting content at ESPN, but that's one small cog of a much, much bigger company. Whereas I had a lot of hands in a lot of different buckets at Pro Football Network in those 2.5 years.
That's interesting. Okay. And then again, after 2 years with them, then you started your own from a betting perspective, right? You took that platform that you built and now you're doing it on your own, right? Can you tell us
Doing it on my own. I took the podcast from Pro Football Network that I started and went national with it. So now on the Believe Podcast Network, where I have a national podcast.
Nice.
Newsletter goes out 3 days a week, bearmanbets.com for that newsletter. One day's free. The other 2 are premium, although I do give out a free pick on Wednesday and Fridays. So the newsletter's out there. And with that, it helps increase the brand where I'm on VSiN a couple of days a week. I'll be on VSiN Wednesday nights.
Nice.
In the fall doing football coverage. So I do a little bit of, I'll give you the analyst head where I'll talk as an analyst on CBS and VSiN. I'll write for the platform, but I'll also be someone that can come and educate you on it. I also teach a class at the University of Florida in sports betting and fantasy content. So I'm teaching those at Florida how to get a career in this field that I've had a career in for 30 years. So whether it's an analyst, whether it's being a consultant, or whether it's even being an adjunct professor, having my own company has allowed me to kind of do all of that.
That's interesting. So can you talk a little bit in terms of, we touched on it already, obviously, throughout our discussion, the explosion of sports betting as we see it today, maybe starts from the average sports bettor. What do you think is like the number one thing that the average bettor actually doesn't understand about sports betting? Then,
They probably don't understand that the way it's structured to heavily favor the house, which, you go to a casino, all the games you play are heavily structured to the house. But when you sit back and say, well, I'm not going to take my chance. There was a little ball rotating around on a roulette table. I know what I need to know about the Dolphins versus the Jets. You still have to remember to do it at the right time, get the right number. I'm not sure there's a lot of people out there who shop for the best number across sports books, who try to get a number on Tuesday instead of on Sunday, because the majority of sports bettors are waking up Sunday morning saying, crap, the NFL's today, I got to go bet.
Yeah.
But you've lost at that point. Now, I'm not saying you can't win. I'm just saying that over time, if you're the Saturday morning, Sunday morning bettor, you're not going to profit. Because
the line has moved, right? In terms of moved. Yeah.
It'd be a lot more profitable to bet on Monday or Tuesday than Saturday or Sunday, but the average public person doesn't think like that. No one wakes up Tuesday morning and says, I got to get my Sunday bet in.
Well, from a perspective of, what you hear, which I kind of disagree with in terms of, is injuries. Besides your starting quarterback, though, if you look at line movement with these, I remember this again, Jets, right? Oh, Darrelle Revis is now playing, shut down cornerback. That doesn't really have that much of an impact on the line itself. Is that correct?
That is correct. Very, very, very little injuries other than quarterbacks move the line, a star running back will move the line, a star receiver will move the line, but you're talking a handful of players. Nobody on defense is going to move the line. It's just not going to happen. Now, Could the total move a little bit if all of a sudden both Jets cornerbacks are out? Yeah, it's likely the game's going to go a little bit higher scoring because you don't have a cornerback. So the total might move, but the point spread is not going to move because Revis is not playing. Now, if your quarterback's not playing, it then depends on how big of a drop-off it is to your backup. Some teams don't have that big of a difference. Like right now, I would say Minnesota's not going to have much of a difference between Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy. But, if, stupid example because it didn't work out, but Tua Tagovailoa goes down, like Teddy Bridgewater and Jacoby Brissett are not going to win the Super Bowl the next day. So the line will move based on the quarterback, but the information is out there. You know if these guys are going to play or not. You watch the game. You saw how bad the injury is. Maybe you don't know until they get tested on Tuesday, but you know that they left the game. You know that they got injured. So most of that is built into that. And by the way, the books know what you know. So if Aaron Rodgers leaves the game early, they're not going to post the line as if Aaron Rodgers is playing. They're going to hedge just like you're going to hedge.
Both ways.
It works both ways. And I do find it amusing at times when I'll get a text message from somebody that says, hey, I heard so-and-so's injured. You should go pound this side. You think you're the only person in the world who knows that?
It's already betted in the line, right?
If you know it, trust me, Vegas knows it. So it's already built in, and very, very few people, especially in football, are going to find an edge late in the game that the books don't know about. Now, you can't say the same thing for more niche sports. Like one of the things I do on Sportsline is I'm their college baseball analyst. And I'm a big college baseball guy, and say what it is. The books aren't getting a lot of baseball action. Caesars wasn't built because of college baseball action, so they're not paying as much attention to it. So there are times where I will find the information about a Wednesday starter or a Thursday starter that I think is going to happen before the books do, and you have that advantage. But they also will catch you after a while when you keep beating them, and they know that. So I would say that the public needs to know that they're not going to beat the book. Your job should just be getting as much information as you can and betting the best way you can.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a particular sport that is more difficult to bet on than others?
Overall, I would say baseball. Major League Baseball. I thought you were going to say
basketball. Okay. Baseball?
No. It's basketball. I actually find basketball, especially the NBA, to be among the easiest because there are trends. You get a 7-game series, you pick up on trends. Like, congratulations to New York Knicks, but the San Antonio Spurs won the first quarter in all 5 games. That's what I bet. I care less who won the game. I bet the Spurs to win the first quarter, and I went 5-0. And the Spurs won 1 game, but they won the first quarter. Karl Anthony Towns was going over his assist number every single night in the playoffs. You can pick up on those trends. Baseball is different because baseball is 95% reliant on the starting pitcher. That's where the line is built into. The line is not built into the starting lineup. The line is not built into the stadium. It's not built into the defense. The line is built into the starting pitcher, who pitches once every 5 days. So every single day is a different team, if you think about it. The New York Yankees on Monday under one pitcher are a completely different team than they are on Tuesday under a different pitcher and Wednesday under a different pitcher. It's the same baseline because of their lineup, but the starting pitcher changes, and therefore it's like almost starting new every day. And is there anything harder than predict what a starting pitcher is going to do when you see him once every 5 days? And then you think you figured it out, and then the bullpen blows the game for you. Well, next time I'm going to bet the first 5 innings instead. So I've had a lot more success betting individual parts of baseball games. Let me bet the first 5 innings when I know who the starters are. Or let me bet a team only when they play on the road because they play differently that way than thinking every single day. So it's a very, really tough sport to bet. Plus, it's also based on every day someone is a huge favorite versus a huge dog. There's no equalizer. I guess there is. You could call the run line equalizer. But if you take the Dolphins and Jets, our 2 crappy teams, there's going to be a point spread. Let's just call it Dolphins -3. That's the equalizer. You're now calling the Dolphins and Jets even with the Dolphins laying 3. So you pick a side, but it's in there. Most of the baseball betting is not based on that. It's bet on the money line where, let's say, the Yankees are -157 versus the Red Sox. That's just to win the game, but you're laying 57 cents. If you lose one baseball game and you're losing as a favorite, betting a favorite, you got to win almost 2 to make up for it. You don't have to do that in the NFL. In the NFL, unless you're betting money lines, but like if I bet the Dolphins to cover the 3, it's just 1 loss. Big difference there.
Okay. And you mentioned something else in terms of like, prop bets and all that stuff, how that has changed. I mean, that's been, exploding as well, right? It's not just the team, the over-unders, the money line, the spread. Yep. It's now the individuals, as you said, with the Knicks in the finals. You're saying like, okay, obviously always had slow starts. So you're picking up on these trends. Is that stuff that you, again, obviously share in your show, right?
Yeah, that's what I do. That's what my newsletter's about, the Bearman Bets newsletter. It's what the show is about that I do. It's all about the trends, the statistics, what's out there. Like, I can give you 100 reasons why the Knicks are better than the Spurs, and I can give you 100 reasons why the Spurs are better than the Knicks. You got to filter through the noise. And what's the noise? If you were to go back and look at the NBA playoffs, I think I hit 67% of my bets in the NBA playoffs in terms of wins versus losses. Somewhere in the 60s, I had a really good playoff streak. None of them were games. I didn't bet one game. Not one single game. I bet quarters. I bet halves. I bet player props, team totals. I didn't bet one game, and I think I was something near like 21-7 or something, and I didn't bet one game. You don't need to bet the games. Bet what you know. Bet the segment you know. I think Karl Anthony Towns is going to go over his assist number. I care less who wins the game, as long as he goes over his assist number. Spurs won the first quarter in their last 8 games. That includes Oklahoma City and includes the Knicks. They didn't win those games, but they won the first quarter. That's what I cared about. Meanwhile, I won money 15 minutes into an NBA game, and you guys watch the rest of it.
What about life betting in terms of like, hey, look, I won the first quarter. Now I'm going to go. Do you do that stuff? You recommend it?
I do. And you have to be in the right position to do that. I think that is the future of sports betting. If that was one of your next questions of where's sports betting going, I think it is the micro markets, the live betting stuff. It's just, you need to be in the right spot. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. I'm not necessarily sitting in front of a TV with nothing else to do but live bet. Like, maybe if you were the 25-year-old fresh out of college who's living in his first apartment and has no kids and no wife, and you could sit there and live bet all day, it's profitable. Depends on the movement.
Like
depends on where you are.
Yeah.
I tend to live bet golf a lot because golf moves a lot slower and you have time to do it. Yeah, you're live betting an NBA game. These runs are, you miss by the time you figure it out, the number's gone. So golf is a much easier sport to bet live. So is baseball. If you can figure it out, it's getting more and more popular for sure.
How has this all changed in terms of the way fans and, these folks engage in sports with, again, betting being available on your apps and all that stuff? What do you see? Again, looking at 20 years ago from now, it's completely different, right?
It is. You got to just look at the fantasy model. There were years where you were a team. You are rooting for your team. And then all of a sudden you start rooting for your fantasy players. You start saying, you know what, the Dolphins aren't going to win, so it'd be really, really nice if Thurman Thomas ran for a touchdown here. The Dolphins are going to lose anyway, so let Thurman Thomas have a big day. Now you're looking at it from a betting perspective. I dated myself with Thurman Thomas.
I was just going to say, all right, there you go.
You're looking at it from a betting perspective where your rooting interest is based on who you have money on or who you have in the pool. So it's just another way to get the fan involved and the fan engaged in the action.
And I mean, that market is huge from a revenue perspective, right? You see, I mean, this is humongous, right?
It is humongous. And we're still nowhere near percent of people betting that we're the percent of people playing fantasy. Like the percent of people playing fantasy is still much bigger than the number of people betting. So there's still a lot of movement to go in terms of betting numbers.
What do you think from a connection there, especially if you look at a sport like football, but even baseball, et cetera, from like, basically a year-long league versus like daily fantasy baseball or, daily fantasy? I think because it's kind of like that blurry line in terms of like from like running a league and then going into the betting. I feel like it's in between there. That's picked up. Daily fantasy has picked up big time what I've seen some of these platforms.
It has, and daily fantasy was always, to me, the entryway to sports betting being legalized. I teach that. I taught that in my class, that for years everybody said daily fantasy was legal and sports betting was illegal. And it made no sense. Like, they're the same thing. You're putting money on the line, betting on players to do things. If you have money on this guy in this daily fantasy event, how's that any different than you betting his prop on this side? So the fact that daily fantasy became as big as it was and became as popular as it was and as accepted as it was allowed the sports betting world to be, all right, we're already doing this. So take the NFL. Part of a lawsuit that prevented sports betting from becoming legal, New Jersey sued, yada, yada, yada. The NFL's already getting money from DraftKings. They're getting money from DraftKings on the daily fantasy side. But no, we don't want your money on the sports betting side. Well, what's the difference? You're getting money from the same company, so if we allow sports betting, then we can accept their money on the betting side. You're already accepting it. So,
but you said the NFL is already getting money from...
Yeah, I was saying if you look at the daily fantasy, let's just circle back to 2016.
Yeah.
Daily fantasy is exploding. Sports betting is illegal. So the NFL is part of a lawsuit that's preventing sports betting, but at the same time, they're accepting money from DraftKings on daily fantasy. But we all want to accept your money from sports betting. We can't do that. Just daily fantasy. What's the difference? So like all of a sudden, daily fantasy becomes accepted. Daily fantasy becomes huge. The leagues are beginning to see that fans are engaged in a way they've never seen before beyond regular fantasy. People are willing to, on a daily basis, put their hard-earned cash on the line in these games, so to speak.
Tell me a little bit
what's different.
What about the impact on athletes, especially if you're thinking you're betting pro, you're betting college as well, right? So what do you feel like the impact on athletes is, with all that stuff going on? Obviously, if you look at the NBA, some of the stuff that, we recently heard, what's your take there?
Well, my opinion there is a little different than most, because there are people who will say that legalized sports betting has caused more issues in the world when it comes to betting, and the integration has caused, more ethical dilemmas. And I would say, hold on, you can't tell me that these issues didn't exist before. You just didn't know about them because it wasn't mainstream. So we've had the Pete Roses of the world, you had the Black Sox, and those are the ones that you know about. Now, in order to have legalized sports betting in each state, a sports book and or the state have to have regulators in place whose jobs are to monitor the integrity of sports betting. So if New Jersey goes live, New Jersey has integrity monitors. If Caesars is in that state, Caesars has integrity monitors. If you're betting the NFL in that state, the NFL has integrity monitors. None of this existed when sports betting was illegal. It was just Nevada. So there was nobody out there. There was no integrity monitors, no watchdogs looking to see if players or friends of players or anybody was dealing and messing with the integrity of the game. So for those that say the acceptance and the legalization of sports betting has caused more issues, I would say, sure, the more betting there is, the more integrity issues are going to be. That's just normal. The more drinking there's going to be, the more DUIs there's going to be. That's just math. But you didn't know about the others because there was nobody watching. So I would tell you that if you come out and say, hey, we caught Javante Porter, Terry Porter, we caught so-and-so illegally throwing a game or throwing a pitch in the dirt or subbing himself out of an NBA game, you caught them. I tell you the system's working because Terry Porter's not getting caught. I mean, Javante Porter's not getting caught 10 years ago. No one's there to catch him. Jamison Williams, who was betting on stuff while at training camp in the Lions a couple of years ago, was suspended for 8 games. He's not getting caught 10 years ago because there's nobody there monitoring him. So you're saying, well, the only reason why he got in trouble is because he was allowed to bet. I'm telling you the only reason he got caught was because there's somebody there to catch him. And now that they caught him and they suspended him, you know about it. Well, you didn't know about the Pete Rose stuff until after Pete Rose was banned from baseball. Yeah. So this stuff has been going on throughout the course of human history. Is there more now? Of course there's more now. You can bet in 39, 40 states. That's just simple math. but you're also hearing about it more. So, my message to the Mike Flores of the world at Pro Football Talk who thinks sports betting is ruining the game and the integrity of the game. No, it's not. You're actually protecting the game because you're catching these players. I would ask anybody, how many baseball or NBA games were thrown or fixed back in the 70s? You have no idea. How many NFL games were thrown in the 80s? You have no idea. You know now, every single time someone does something stupid, you know it. It's there. It's caught. Now, could all these scandals, whether it's Alabama baseball or it's the, Toronto Raptors or all these things you're hearing about, they're bad for the game, no doubt. It ruins the integrity of the game. But they're isolated incidents in the grand scheme of billions of dollars being bet.
Plus, you're not going to, that's going to happen no matter what, if you have a watchdog or not. At least to your argument, at least now you have a watchdog. Once upon a time, you weren't allowed to buy alcohol. That didn't mean that people weren't drinking, right? So your argument basically being, hey, 70s and 80s, it's not that it didn't happen. It just happened illegally with a platform that nobody would monitor, which is actually a good point, because I always find it interesting in terms of if you look at sports betting, it's like, again, it's ruining the game or fantasy, this and that. I don't really understand the argument. It doesn't. I think it engages more people with the game. Now, for whatever reason you're watching or I'm watching, if I'm watching the Knicks, I'm not even betting because I'm a diehard Knicks fan. You're saying, dude, I don't care. I'm neutral. I'm just going to put a bet on the first quarter. But I think it engages people more so, again, given if you look back at your history and stuff than ever before.
And there's always limits to how far you want to go before you cross that line. And people also are mad that people go to games and yell at players for costing them money. Yes, that. And you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do it.
But that's been yelled at for everything else beforehand too.
But that doesn't mean it started in 2018. I worked with Robert Smith at ESPN. Robert Smith was a college football analyst. Yeah. And one day I was being an ass to him. And he goes, "What's your problem?" I go, "You cost me a fantasy championship, that game. When you came out on Monday night at halftime, I'm mad at you about that. That happened 10 years ago." So we have this in us to be mad at the players in fantasy, just like we do with sports betting. Now, do people take it overboard? Sure. You shouldn't be at a game screaming at a player. It costs you $10. You shouldn't be sending threatening messages to their mom on Twitter. Yeah. But to think these things weren't going on before betting, and that's my biggest point, is just because legalized sports betting started in 2018 doesn't mean nobody was betting before 2018. People were betting. They were betting illegally. They were betting overseas. They were betting with bookies, and they were having these same exact problems they were having now. It was just shadier.
So we talked about your journey. We talked about, betting. We talked about fantasy analytics and all that stuff. What do you see from a media perspective in terms of changing in the future? Especially with social media, the high level of engagement. How do you think the media is going to change?
I think it's just going to be consolidated more. There was a day and an age where there's all these different networks were trying to partner with all these different books, and some worked, some didn't. Fox Bet didn't work. ESPN Bet didn't work. NBC's partnership with Points Bet didn't work. I do think you're going to see more consolidation where the books and the networks combine as one. ESPN and DraftKings is a perfect example. I don't think it's going to be a network having a book. You're not going to have Fox Bet. You're not going to have ESPN Bet. But you might have NBC Sunday Night Football presented by FanDuel. I think it's more of a licensing and sports media sponsorship thing than it is, all right, we have to have our own book. The days of the networks wanting to have a piece of the sports betting empire are gone. They just want to get the money from a sponsorship and licensing deal. DraftKings, the same thing. Instead of trying to be like Penn Gaming combined with ESPN to have ESPN Bet, that was a colossal disaster. So now DraftKings is like, we don't want to be combined with ESPN. We want to be merged with them in a sponsorship. You go to ESPN, you see DraftKings. You go to DraftKings, you see ESPN. They're more of a marketing and sponsorship licensing
like
deal.
A joint venture of the sort. Yeah. Okay. And what do you think, again, the whole social media, obviously with, Twitter, X, all that stuff. I mean, you think that's going to further develop into more engaging?
It will, because people are now making videos on Instagram and TikTok, and people have their own platforms. And, being an influencer is different than it used to be in the past. Now people who claim they know sports betting are out there just spitting out things. And it's a dangerous world out there, because you should really trust the people who know what they're doing, the people who've been in the business for a while, instead of somebody who's just out there spitting out data. It's going to continue. There's no handcuff on social media, so to speak.
What do you think, from a couple of questions to end this, discussion in terms of just in general, what do you think, podcast versus television? What do you think is the future more so? Is it podcast, is interactions, Like
I
you
would
have
say
that way?
podcasts and streaming. I think the streaming, the YouTube
Yeah.
channels, having your own content creator channel is going to be the future as opposed to just television shows. Television is never going to go away, as you've seen. It's the home of live sports action. Like you're not going to see a live NFL game on a stream. Yeah, you'll see a YouTube every once in a while and a Netflix, etc. But like Twitch isn't going to be hosting the World Series. But for the little bits and pieces of content creation, it's the streaming, it's the YouTubes, it's the social media, it's the Twitches.
Interesting. What was the most interesting event you ever worked? I think you said 2 Super Bowls. Was that it, or was there something else?
Oh, I worked a lot of events. Most interesting from what perspective?
That's a good point. I don't know. It's just, let me put it this way. You look back at it, I'm like, that was the most fun, whatever that included, however you kind of justify that event that you ever covered.
Well, the first Super Bowl I worked, which was the Chiefs-Niners that went to overtime. I had spent my entire career building up to covering a Super Bowl and took a great risk by leaving ESPN to go to Pro Football Network, and then got to the Super Bowl, walking in those doors, seeing a game go to overtime, covering the red carpet NFL honors, a couple days earlier, doing Radio Row at the media headquarters, something that I've heard about for years, where I had my own booth at Radio Row. Doing that entire Super Bowl week into the game was probably like the pinnacle. In terms of interesting, my first Masters was 2010, and it was also Tiger's return from his sex therapy debacle, the November crash with his wife and the whole divorce and finding out everything we found out about Tiger between November of 2009 and his return in April of 2010. No way, shape, or form would that ever be allowed again, that Tiger would return and use the Masters as his return. There was no way Augusta would allow that. But that event was a total circus because Tiger had disappeared for 5 months. Scandal, all we heard was all the girls and this and that. And his first event back was the Masters, and the Masters is already a huge event to begin with, and it was my first Masters. So the combination of it being my first Masters with Tiger making his return was an event that I will always remember as being just crazy. The first remote I ever did for ESPN was the 2008 U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, and that was Tiger and Rocco Medier going to a 19-hole playoff.
What was that again? What year was that? I remember
2008 U.S. Open. Tiger had a torn ACL and a broken fibula. Played one of the hardest courses in golf and tied for the lead at the U.S. Open with a huge putt on 18. I was in the truck when it happened, and not necessarily for your audience as to what was said in the truck when Tiger made the putt. A lot of words I can't repeat. That will always remember some of the top-notch people.
But you can repeat it. So it was going back and forth, you're saying. It was colorful, you're saying.
It was very colorful between the green room where Tom Rinaldi, Chris Berman, Scott Van Pelt, and others were when Tiger made that putt. Very colorful. And then we had to come back the next day and play 19 more holes to decide a champion. And then we find out Tiger had already been playing with a torn ACL and a broken fibula. One of the greatest accomplishments in sports history. And I was at that event. The following year, in 2009, I was at the British Open when Tom Watson was 59 years old, and he was standing over a putt to win the Open Championship 59. I was in the truck, and I always remember it was the quietest I've ever heard in my entire life. Everybody was standing up. Not a word was said. Those are some of the highlights. Been to 8 national championship games, so I've seen them all there, whether it's Florida winning, which is my alma mater, or seeing the Alabama dynasty, then beating Clemson, etc. Clemson beating Alabama, so I was a part of all of those. A lot of golf, for sure. 2 Super Bowls.
What was the best sports analyst you ever worked with? I mean, you mentioned a few in our discussion here. I mean, best. Well, I'm sure they're all good, but any particular favorite?
I would say that the consummate professional in terms of work ethic and on-air product and using research content to better the broadcast is probably Mike Tirico.
I knew you were going to say that. I mean,
I would say that the coolest cat in the room would be Scott Van Pelt. Like, he's the guy you would just literally go hang out at a bar with, play 18, and drink back a couple of beers, and go play Tecmo Bowl with him afterwards.
Yeah.
Like Scott's like, he's like you and me. Like,
just
there was one event in Scotland where they screwed up the whole car situation in terms of who had a car and who didn't. And Scott's like, here's my car. And I had Scott Van Pelt's car for the week. So like that, he's that type of guy. Nicest guy on the planet would be Tom Rinaldi. Like, there's just no nicer guy than him. Just Tom Rinaldi's like your great uncle that's going to give you $100 every time you see him. So, but
I'm sure you worked with some jerks too, not to be named, but I'm sure you had that too, right?
Yeah. We're not going to name any names, but there were a couple of people that were, You knew that if you were scheduled to work with them, that would you had to bring your A game, and you also had to bite your tongue a few times. We won't name names, but there are some people that I did not like for sure. Some are still on air, some are not.
I mean, that's just the way it goes. I guess that's in every profession, right?
Yeah. I would say for the most part, having worked with talent from 17 years old to now, we're talking 30 some odd years, mostly positive experiences with the talent. There are some egos you're just not going to get past. Some are harder to work with than others. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the best sports city in America, in your opinion?
Best sports city in America?
If you had to pick one.
Probably Chicago.
Not pretty good.
We go Chicago because they're passionate and they respect it when you win and they respect it when you lose. I mean, you had a Cubs team that didn't win for 100 years and you still love them. I would say rabid would probably be Philly, but Philly goes over the top at times, like way over the top.
Yeah.
Chicago is probably the overall package because of passion and just general respect.
Yeah.
So, and I've been to them all. Like I've gone to 48 Dolphin road games across the country. I've been to almost every market you could possibly think of. Yes, I'd probably go Chicago.
All right, good. Last one. What do you prefer from a betting perspective, college or NFL football?
It depends on the time of year. Earlier in the year, college. Late in the year, NFL.
Okay.
Early in the year, you can find some interesting lines in college, and before it starts getting into conference play. NFL, first couple of weeks are tough.
Okay.
So.
Well, now I appreciate the time, David. Now, last thing though, could you mention again what the name of your newsletters? I mean, some of the audience might want to read up on stuff. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean the platform is Betting with Bearman. The newsletter is at bearmanbets.com. My last name, bearmanbets.com. The newsletter's out 3 days a week. Monday is completely free. Wednesday and Friday, I usually give you the intro and one pick for free, and then I make you sign up and pay for the rest. Not a lot of money. We're talking $99 a year, $9.99 a month. Well worth it. I do well. You can win that back in a couple of bets. You can find me on Twitter at David Bearman. I tend to tweet out a lot of my stuff or jump into the CBS Sportsline Discord where I often am at as well.
David, I appreciate it. That sounds awesome. Thank you very much.
You signed up for the newsletter?
Not yet, but I'm going to. All right. Thanks, David.